The black box phenomenon. I have been dying to show people this. There's going to be a linear evolution. Now, you probably have heard of quantum. We are totally missing the evolution link. You heard here first. Photonic layer, neuromorphic layer, NGRC. It stands for Next Generation Reservoir Computing. Also really frontier science. There's just not much known about it. I'm talking about guys with PhD in computer science, tech CEOs. You know them. It hurts more when you have the knowledge of the black box, but you still choose to deceive people. O of n squared is happening here. For large language models, already a big problem. If we're gonna do world models, I think that's just gonna blow up the goddamn data center. I think this is a conversation that needs to be continued. People want the gadgets. They want something they can play with. 2012. It was 14 years ago, a long time ago. I've chosen computer science. Now, the field or the degree was computing and information systems. And I will tell you this, back in those days, the hottest thing then was cloud computing. As I was working full-time, I also enrolled in these studies full-time. It was not just theory. I went straight to practice. And yes, cloud computing was the hottest thing. And now nobody even mentions cloud computing anymore because I think data centers, it's already matter of fact. You know, you don't talk about it because it's just what it is. Clusters of servers in data centers all over the world. But since then, machine learning, ML, deep neural networks, DNN, has been all the talk, all the motion commotion, all of the development since then. And I think it has grown to the point that I'm not happy. I'm not happy with AI, artificial intelligence, being used as a keyword for anyone to talk about AI. This is what I think is going on. And it is called the black box phenomenon. I have been dying to show people this. If we look at any system and view it strictly in terms of inputs and outputs without knowledge of what's the engine behind it. In this case, I mean, right now we're dealing with primarily transformers-based architecture. That is the large language models where we are interacting with, that are the visions model, that are the diffusion models, and the upcoming physical and world models. But all of them are transformers. If you know, you know. There's a paper called Attention is All You Need. That is like the godfather of transformers. That is the godfather of that black box. It really depends on how much of the black box do you know? I think that is the information gap. That determines whether you really know what you're talking about, or you're just guessing and filling up the gaps at what you do not know. And honest to God, I am not cool with so many things that are happening today. But I think we're gonna slowly get there. Oh goddamn, this episode gonna be hard. Last time I really tried to, put all of the mapping that I've done. The summary of last video, what I was really trying to say is this. We are not at intelligence explosion yet. We're definitely not at super intelligence yet. Oh my God, if you are in the field, you have to understand there's so much work that needs to be done that it amazes me that almost like we are hiding this fact. Or there's just like some people who are not in the field who are just blowing it up like, oh, we're already there. Be scared that AI is going to do that. Look. No. Scratch this. Hear me out. Scratch this. We are nowhere near super intelligence. We are nowhere near intelligence explosion. But with the last video, what I gave you was the recipe of the steps that needs to be taken in order to get there. Number 1, automate the scientific method. Number 2, from mathematics to discover mathematics. And number 3, as we have always conducted the scientific method by observing that which is outside of us. Now let's try this. We are going to observe what is within us. The scientist conducting the experiment is also the observer that is observing the experiment within him or her. You got that? You got that? Did I stutter? Oh yeah. I am going to go there. I'm going to go there right now, and I'm going to talk about the big O notation and the bottleneck of transformers today. And that is, drum rolls please, O of n squared.
The O of n squared complexity of transformers stems from their self-attention mechanism. In this architecture, every input token must attend to, interact with every other token simultaneously to understand context. If you have n tokens in a sequence, for example, a paragraph, the model calculates roughly n times n unique interactions.
Exponential explosion. You don't want that. Go back to this over here, you'll see that O of n squared is happening here. And if you take out self-attention mechanism within transformers, then you would have to come up with something completely different, because self-attention mechanism is what makes transformers what it is. I like to joke that, if Trump hears that transformers has the big O of n squared complexity problem, he would say this: you need more power? You need more power? We're gonna give you more power. Let's build bigger data centers. Let's call NVDA. Yo, we need more of them silicon chips. And let's just crank up that, entropy to the maximum. Definitely that's not the solution. That is like you are bringing brute force on top of brute force. Should we take a break for some bananas? I actually really like the colors of it. But as we're talking about scaling data centers and really improving our hardware, here's the thing. Yes, I am talking about it as though, transformers, oh my God, how dare you to have a bottleneck. It is okay to have a bottleneck. Actually, when you have a bottleneck, what is happening is that, we have reached a certain threshold through which it kind of forces us to really either improve the algorithm itself, which is transformers, or improve the hardware, right? The horsepower that does the computing, or gives you, the power as well as the hardware for compute. And since we're talking about that, we cannot escape the hardware evolution. Guys, I did this before I did my last video. In 2026, still 95 to 98% of microchips that are produced every day, every month, every quarter, every year is the microchip that we all know and love. That is part of your personal computer, of your smartphones, and pretty much every device that is out there. In the future, there's going to be a linear evolution. Photonic and neuromorphic. You heard here first. Photonic and neuromorphic. I'm not saying that we are going to throw away this silicon microchip, but we are going to add improvement layers on top of it. So imagine silicon, photonic layer, neuromorphic layer, and once that we have silicon, photonic, neuromorphic, or neuromorphic, photonic, silicon microchips, then we can take that leap onto quantum. And then trust me, when we do that, all of our minds is gonna be blown. Yay, photonic, silicon. When? Let's ask when. When did it happen? Oh, it was rolling out mid-2026. So it just rolled out. Okay, so essentially, if you want me to really quickly tell you what the hell is a photonic silicon chip, it's like this. Instead of electrons running around, we're going to have photons running around, the speed of light. Photonic is really there for speed. Now then, what the hell is neuromorphic? Let's try to explain. Okay, neuromorphic means, well, it is literally inspired by the brain. Neuron-like. So the human brain, we have 80 billion neurons and 100 trillion synaptic connections. And neuromorphic is really modeled by that. So again, photon, speed of light, neuromorphic, efficiency. How do I explain neuromorphic to people? Oh my god. Hey Gemini, how do I explain neuromorphic to people? Neuromorphic photonic silicon chips represent the ultimate intersection of everything we have been talking about. Brain-inspired architecture, which is neuromorphic, plus light-speed physics of photonics, and manufacturing scale of silicon chips. That's what I was trying to say. So before we kind of, wrap it up, and I almost forgot, we have to talk about reservoir computing. Actually, in the last video, I showed the video itself, but I didn't really want to say reservoir computing. It was actually a little bit of an eye-opener for me. So it's also new. It's also really frontier science. There's just not much known about it. And again, guys, I prepared this before I made the last video. My prediction is transformers are here to stay. However, something else needs to be as mature as transformers. We need to pay as much attention that we can as we have done it for transformers. And that is reservoir computing. That is what you see here, NGRC. It stands for Next Generation Reservoir Computing. I really think this is going to be something that changes the way we do physical AI and the way we do world models. World models through transformers is going to be, oh my god, so heavy on computation. Big O of n squared for large language models. Already a big problem. If we're gonna do world models, I think that's just gonna blow up the goddamn data center.
You know, there is something miraculous happening in your brain right now. Close your eyes. I want you to think of the song We Will Rock You by Queen. Chances are you can hear it in your head. But here's the mystery. Where is it coming from? Your eardrums are not vibrating. The outside world is not pushing the song into your brain. You are generating it internally. This is actually one of the fundamental tasks that the brain needs to perform, called autonomous pattern generation. From a zebrafinch singing its song to a pitcher throwing a ball, brains constantly face the challenge of learning to produce precise sequences of neural activity. So if we want to build a machine that thinks like us, we have to solve this specific problem. How do we build a box that generates complex behavior seemingly out of thin air? In the previous video, we saw that standard neural networks are essentially static machines, having no sense of time. To fix this, we introduced recurrence, letting neurons feed their activity back into themselves. But as we hinted, there's another way to think.
By the way, this recurrence is something that our brain does, but transformers, it doesn't do that. So pay attention to this.
About recurrence, not as an engineering fix, but as a fundamental property of a dynamical system. Think of it like a swimming pool. You jump in, this is the input. You make a splash, but after you leave, the water doesn't stop. The ripples you generated spread, reflect off the walls, and interfere with each other, creating complex patterns. Essentially, the input just gave the system a little nudge, but the water keeps dancing according to its own internal physics, creating a kind of memory of your dump. Now, we know that brains compute with the nerve cells, acting as individual units, interacting with each other. In a way, they are like individual water molecules in that pool. Imagine a bucket of n neurons, say 1,000 of them. We'll call this our reservoir. Let's connect them randomly. Some connections are strong, some are weak. Some positive, some negative. It's a big tangled mess. Let's write down what happens to a single neuron in that pool. At each moment, its state is determined by where it was a moment ago, plus the incoming ripples from all other neurons. Here, Wij is the strength of the connection between neurons J and I, and sigma is our activation function, mimicking how a real neuron only fires once its input voltage crosses a threshold. But here's the catch. In a real swimming pool, if you wait long enough, the water settles. The friction kills the energy, and the ripples die out. Now, mathematically, this friction is actually a good thing. It creates stability. If we didn't have it, if we cranked up the weights too high, the network would generate a self-sustained dance, but it would be chaotic. Chaos here means a sensitivity to initial conditions. If a single neuron misfired by a millisecond, that tiny error would explode, and the whole pattern would change. You can't compute with an explosion. So we tune the network to have what's called an echo-state property. It means that every input leaves a temporary trace, an echo in the network's activity, but that echo gradually fades over time. But this brings us back to the swimming pool problem. If the ripples eventually die out, how do we sing a long song? We need to keep the water moving. We need a driver. Let's introduce a simple rhythmic signal Z of t, something like a boring sine wave, to keep the energy levels up. Think of it like a background clock. In the brain, this might correspond to the rhythmic oscillations like theta or gamma waves that act as neural pacemakers. Each neuron now receives this driving signal scaled by the value mu, unique to that neuron. The goal then is to take this boring driving signal Z of t and transform it into an interesting target signal Y of t, like a zebrafinch song or a Mortal command. It's like dropping a stone in the pool every 10 seconds, but sculpting the walls of the pool so perfectly that the resulting ripples sound like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. That sounds extremely complicated, and that's because it is. In fact, to this day, recurrent neural networks are notoriously hard to train. But here comes the crucial mental shift. You see, in traditional machine learning, you act as a micromanager. You try to adjust every single connection weight between every pair of neurons to sculpt that perfect splash. The problem is that once you introduce recurrence, the interactions become entangled in time.
Honestly, the part where they kind of change the shape of the pool, that kind of threw me off. I didn't really understand. But then, as I was thinking about it, a better way to really understand what's going on is this. Imagine this recurrent loop. So let's say a neuron can have a feedback loop on itself. If you introduce a sine wave or any kind of wave onto our brain, which has neurons, and neurons can do this recurring loop, just imagine the possibilities that each neuron creates, just like the waves in the pool. It's almost like infinite amount of possibilities of how this wave can remix itself.
The effect of nudging a wave by 1% right now might have unexpected consequences 10 seconds from now. Because these ripples are bouncing around in loops, it's incredibly hard to untie the knot. Ask a radical question. What if instead of trying to tame this mass, we embraced it? What if we don't train the reservoir at all? This is the philosophy of reservoir computing. We leave the connections inside the bucket completely random. We don't touch them. Rather than trying to force water molecules to bounce around perfectly, we just learn to work with the physics we already have. Let's see what happens when we let a simple sine wave hit that random network. Examining individual neurons, it looks like a mess. But reservoir computing relies on a beautiful mathematical curiosity. The answer we're looking for is already hidden in that noise. We just need to learn to look at the mess at the right angle. Now, this might sound like magic, and we'll see why it works in a moment. But here's what I mean. Let's add one final neuron, called the readout. It listens to the activity of all other neurons, but doesn't talk back. The state of that readout, x of t, is simply a weighted sum of all neurons' states in the network. While we can't punch the network, we can adjust these readout weights. In fact, this is the only thing we can do. You can think of it like this. Each neuron is shouting its own random gibberish into its microphone. Our job then is to simply tweak the volume knobs on all of those microphones in such a way that the collective hum sounds like our target song.
Alright, so it's getting dark, but the last part is, why would it work? Why would we be able to find a beautiful song within all that chaos? And the answer is exactly that. Within that chaos, mathematically, statistically, it will just create random, almost infinite amount of possibilities. It is really this feedback loop on itself that does the magic. So let's finish the last part. Why would it work at all?
We let the network run for a while and record the voices of all n neurons. Mathematically, we're looking for a set of coefficients such that when we add up all these random signals, we get our target y of t. It turns out this is a famous problem with a simple analytical solution. It is just a linear regression in disguise. The math for finding the perfect bird song is the exact same math used to fit a straight line through a set of points on the graph. I won't go through the derivation here. I think the conceptual picture is far more important, but the upshot is this. We can calculate the optimal weights in a single sweep. Once we lock those weights in, if we drive the network with that simple sine wave, it produces a complex rippling response that the readout neuron translates into a beautiful zebrafinch song.
There's a black box in there, and if you watch other videos about reservoir computing, it's this. In case of water, again, you have water in the pool, you put something in it and it creates waves. In a way, we don't care about what the waves do. We are not training the waves to wave. We let it do what it does, and then only we read the output and then sort of dial in, dial out the knobs so that we can find really the pattern that we're looking for. I think that's the genius about it. Alright guys, I brought in the big guns, aka light. I am Alwar. Okay, so I think it has been eye-opening for me to see all kinds of people that I know or I've watched, and then some other people I do not know, I just discovered, who are either not possessing the knowledge inside the black box, but then they can recognize certain patterns from the inputs and the outputs alone. But then do not underestimate the information gap. There's a lot of projection that can happen when you have the information gap. I'm not saying that, you should not talk about AI. I'm not saying that you should not, have your theories and your hypotheses out there. You can say whatever you want. I can say the sky is blue and you can say the sky is green. The sky is not going to change just because somebody has an opinion about it. But then also I think We are walking to the territory of, that contract between us as human beings to determine what is true and what is not. I think the lines are getting so blurry today. For me, what hurts even more is this. When people know exactly what's inside the black box, people in the field, and I'm talking about guys with PhD in computer science, CEOs, tech CEOs, you know them. I think this hurts more. It hurts more when you have the knowledge of the black box, but you still choose to deceive people. And when I see that, when I hear that, my blood is boiling, and I think that is the kind of deception that hurts more. When you know, but you still choose to lie. I think this is a conversation that needs to be continued. We are really in the age of applied knowledge, really. I think this is what I was trying to say, which is that it doesn't really matter the knowledge that you have in your head. People want the gadgets. They want something they can play with. And that is the reason why computer science, which to me it's really applied mathematics, applied knowledge. Computer science, including machine learning, deep neural networks and beyond, is and will be for a long time the hottest thing there is today.